I never thought a single voicemail could change the way I see my entire life, but that's exactly what happened. It came in on a cold December morning, right when I was finishing breakfast. My phone buzzed with a notification, a voicemail, from my father, Martin. I hesitated before pressing play, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice, cold and sharp, cut through the speaker. "Christmas is cancelled. Don't bother showing up. And by the way, we're considering legal action. If you keep pushing this." No warmth, no explanation, no trace of family in his tone. Just a threat, like I was a stranger they needed to push out of their lives. I sat there for a moment, phone still in my hand, feeling this strange mix of anger and relief wash over me. You see, this wasn't a sudden fallout. This had been building for years. For as long as I can remember, I'd been the one bailing them out, paying off my sister Sophie's maxed-out credit cards, covering the shortfalls on the family mortgage, helping my parents, Martin and Susan, maintain the lifestyle they felt entitled to, the vacations, the new cars, the fancy dinners, even when they couldn't afford any of it. And through it all, they made sure to remind me I was never quite enough. I was the fallback plan, the emergency fund, the one they called when things got messy. But I was never truly part of the family, not really. That morning, after hearing the voicemail, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. Quietly, without fanfare, I removed my name from the $380,000 mortgage I'd been co-signed on for years. It wasn't easy. I'd put my own credit on the line for that loan. But I realized something important. I didn't owe them my life. I didn't owe them my future. As soon as the paperwork went through, the reaction was immediate. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Missed. Calls, text messages, voicemails piling one on top of the other. 67 missed calls in a single day. They weren't subtle. The messages started out angry. "How dare you do this to your family? Do you know what you've done to us?" Then they shifted to guilt trips. "We've always supported you. Family comes first. We're so disappointed in you." But by the end of the day, desperation was creeping in. "Please call us back. We need to talk. Don't do this to us." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel crushed under the weight of their expectations. I felt calm. Looking back, it's hard to explain how things got to this point. It's not like they were always villains. There were good memories, family dinners, holidays, moments when I truly felt close to them. But somewhere along the line, something shifted. I became the safety net, the one they leaned on when they wanted something but didn't want to face the consequences, and I let it happen. Partly because I loved them, partly because I thought that's just what family does. But over time it became clear. The more I gave, the more they took, and the less they respected me for it. I remember one night, maybe a year before the voicemail, sitting alone in my apartment going through my bank statements. I had paid off nearly $15,000 in Sophie's credit card debt. I'd covered a $10,000 shortfall on my parents' mortgage, just to stop the bank from foreclosing. I was the one paying the utilities on their second home. And yet when they went on vacation, a family trip to Italy, I wasn't invited. They posted photos on Facebook, all smiles, wine glasses raised, beautiful landmarks in the background. I found out about it after the fact, scrolling through my feed like some outsider looking in. That was the moment when something inside me cracked. I realized I wasn't part of the family in the way they claimed. I was a resource, a convenient wallet, someone they could turn to when things got hard, but not someone they wanted to share their lives with. And slowly, over the next year, I started to pull back. Not in a dramatic, confrontational way, just quietly, carefully, putting up boundaries. It wasn't easy. Every time I tried to say no, the guilt came flooding in. "You're the only one we can count on. Why are you being so selfish? Don't you care about your own family?" But something had shifted. The voicemail was the final push. I sat there, listening to my father's voice, and I knew this was my chance to break free, to stop playing the role they had cast me in and start living my own life. Removing my name from the mortgage was just the beginning. What came next would shake everything up, in ways none of us could have predicted. I remember the night that really broke me. We were all sitting at dinner, me, my parents, and Sophie, and they were excitedly talking about an upcoming family trip. I sat there smiling, nodding along, thinking I was part of the plan. Italy, they said. 2 weeks, beautiful hotels, wine tours, boat rides along the Amalfi Coast. It sounded amazing. I'd always wanted to visit Italy, and after everything I'd done to help the family stay afloat, I figured, of course, I'd be included. But then, as the conversation kept going, something felt off. They were talking about hotel room arrangements, and there was no mention of me. I waited, thinking maybe they'd get to it, but then Sophie said it outright. "Yeah, we just didn't think you'd really fit in on this trip. It's more for the 3 of us." I remember sitting there, stunned, as my parents nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "It's just easier this way," my mom added casually, reaching for her wine glass. I wanted to say something and to ask why, after everything, they didn't think I should be there. But all I could do was sit there, feeling this strange numbness settle over me. I paid for their vacations, I paid for their mortgage, I paid for Sophie's college loans. And yet, when it came to being part of the actual family, I was extra, not necessary. Later that night, I checked Facebook, and there it was. The post that drove the knife a little deeper. A photo of the 3 of them at the airport, all smiles, suitcases in hand, ready to board their flight. No mention of me, no tag, no text. Just another reminder that I was invisible when it counted. I stared at that photo for a long time, wondering how I let it get this bad. The days after that trip were a blur. They came back raving about the food, the sights, the memories they made. I smiled politely, asked the right questions, and pretended like it didn't hurt. But inside, something had shifted. I started keeping track of everything. The payments I'd made, the loans I'd co-signed, the bills I'd covered. Not out of spite, but because I needed to see it for myself. I needed to face the reality I'd been ignoring for too long. There was one night, about a month after they got back, when I pulled out a folder I'd been quietly filling. It had copies of bank transfers, credit card statements, text messages asking for money, emails about bills. I laid them all out on the table, looking at the sheer volume of it. Tens of thousands of dollars, years of financial support, all from me. And what did I get in return? Exclusion, mockery, and a role I never signed up for. That dinner argument was the breaking point, because it forced me to see the truth. This wasn't a family that appreciated my sacrifices. This was a family that expected them, that felt entitled to them. And the worst part? I had trained them to think that way. Every time I said yes, every time I bailed them out, I taught them that I was there to fix their problems, no questions asked. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling this heavy weight pressing down on my chest. I realized I had a choice. Keep going, keep playing the part they wanted me to play, or start rewriting the script. I didn't know exactly how I'd do it yet. I didn't know how messy it would get, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change, and soon. Once I faced the truth, I couldn't unsee it. For weeks, I kept going back to that folder I'd put together, the bank statements, the receipts, the text messages. Each piece of paper told a story I had been ignoring for years. Sophie's emergency credit card payments, my parents' overdue mortgage that I covered just in time, utility bills, car repairs, even luxury expenses like spa days and expensive gifts they just couldn't afford right now. And me, always stepping in, always patching the holes. At first, I didn't know what I was going to do with all this. Part of me felt ashamed, not of them, but of myself for letting it go on this long. I kept thinking, how did I become the person they relied on but never respected? Why was I the one paying for everything when they treated me like I didn't matter? I realized something huge. They were never going to stop asking. There was no magical moment when they'd say, "You've done enough, Liam." The only person who could stop this cycle was me. The first real step I took was financial. Removing myself from the mortgage was symbolic, yes, but it was also practical. I called the bank, made sure the paperwork was in order, and officially untangled myself from their debts. It felt like cutting a heavy chain off my ankle. For the first time in years, I looked at my own finances, my own goals, my own dreams, and thought, what if I put myself first? What if I used that money to build my own life instead of propping up theirs? But it wasn't enough to just walk away quietly. I needed them to understand why. I needed them to see the full picture. So, one evening, I sat down and drafted a post. It wasn't bitter or angry. It was honest. I laid out the facts, how much I'd paid, how often I'd bailed them out, how I'd been left out and disrespected despite everything I'd done. I attached screenshots, bank records, and old messages to back it all up. And then I hit post. I didn't do it to humiliate them, I did it to reclaim my story. For so long they'd controlled the narrative. Liam is selfish. Liam doesn't help enough. Liam doesn't care about his family. But the truth was the opposite. I had given them everything, and they had taken and taken until there was nothing left for me. Posting the truth wasn't revenge, and it was clarity. The fallout was immediate. The comments flooded in. Friends messaged me privately, some saying they had no idea, others admitting they'd suspected something was wrong. Family members I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, some in support, others in shock. My parents and Sophie, though, they went into full damage control. They called, they texted, they left angry voicemails. How dare you, Air family? Business like that? You're making us look bad. Take it down now. But for once I didn't budge. It's funny how when you start telling the truth, people who benefited from your silence suddenly panic. I wasn't being cruel. I was just being honest. And with every message they sent, every attempt to pull me back, I felt a little stronger. I realized they weren't mad because I'd hurt them. They were mad because I'd stopped playing along. I wasn't their fixer anymore. I was just me, finally free to tell my own story. I knew the confrontation was coming. After the post went up, and after I removed myself from the mortgage, the calls didn't stop. In fact, they doubled. Sophie left long voice messages, swinging between anger and pleading. My mom, Susan, texted me nonstop, asking for a family talk, saying we needed to fix this privately. My dad? His messages were cold, sharp, and full of threats, but I was done hiding. If we were going to have this conversation, it was going to be on my terms, so I agreed to meet them at a small diner in Chicago, a place we used to go when I was a kid. It felt almost poetic, coming back to a familiar spot but with everything laid bare. I arrived early, heart pounding but head clear. I already knew what I wanted to say. When they walked in, I could feel the tension. My father sat stiffly, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. My mother looked flustered, wringing her hands. Sophie wouldn't meet my eyes. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Martin broke the silence. "Why are you doing this, Liam? You're tearing the family apart." I took a breath. "I'm not tearing anything apart. I'm just refusing to carry it anymore." I pulled out the folder, the same one. I'd pieced together over months. I laid it on the table. These are the payments I've made over the years, the debts I've covered, the emergencies I've fixed. I want you to look at them and tell me, when was I ever enough for you? My mom jumped in, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "Liam, we never asked you to do all this." But I shook my head. "No, you didn't ask. You expected it. And when I tried to step back, you guilted me. You made me believe that saying no was betrayal." Sophie finally spoke, her voice small. "We didn't mean to hurt you." For a second I saw a flicker of something real in her eyes. Maybe regret, maybe just shock at seeing me stand up. And then came the twist none of them saw coming. The door opened, and in walked my grandfather, Robert. He was the only person in the family who'd ever seen me clearly, who'd pulled me aside over the years and quietly told me, "You don't owe them everything." I hadn't asked him to come, but there he was, sharp-eyed and calm, carrying a manila envelope. He sat down next to me and placed the envelope on the table. "I thought this was a good time to clear something up," he said. My parents shifted uncomfortably. Robert continued, "I've rewritten the family trust." My dad's face was drained of color. My mom froze. Sophie stared, wide-eyed. Robert smiled slightly. "From now on, Liam is the sole beneficiary. The house, the savings, the assets, they're his. I'm sorry, Martin, Susan, Sophie, but you've had enough chances." The silence that followed was like a punch to the chest. My parents were stunned, mouths opening and closing without words. Sophie let out a small, shocked gasp. And me? I just sat there, heart pounding, but feeling for the first time in years like the ground beneath me was solid. I stood up, slowly gathering my folder. This isn't revenge, I told them quietly. This is me choosing a different life. One where I'm not constantly drained, constantly blamed, constantly shut out. I hope one day you'll understand that. I looked at Sophie, saw the tears welling up, and almost felt myself crack. But I held steady. Walking out of that diner, I felt like I was stepping into a new chapter. One where I wasn't the family ATM, the emotional dumping ground, or the invisible son. I was just me, finally free to figure out who that was. After I left the diner, my phone didn't stop buzzing. The notifications came in waves, first from Sophie, then my mom, then even Martin, who almost never texted. Sophie was the most emotional, her messages a mix of regret and panic. Please, Liam, can we talk? I didn't know it was this bad. I'm sorry, okay? My mum's messages were guilt-laced. We're still your parents, no matter what. Family doesn't just cut each other off. Martin, unsurprisingly, went straight to anger. You think you're better than us now? You'll regret. This? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button more than once. But I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because I knew if I opened the door even a little, I'd be sucked right back in. This was the hardest part, honestly. The aftershock, the part where you second-guess everything, where you wonder, am I the bad guy here? Did I go too far? But deep down, I knew. This wasn't about punishment. It was about survival. A few days later, Sophie asked to meet in person. Part of me wanted to say no, but something told me to hear her out. We met at a quiet park, away from everything. She looked different, not the confident, demanding sister I'd always known, but someone smaller, sadder. She sat on the bench, eyes downcast, twisting her hands in her lap. I didn't realize how much you were carrying, she said softly. I just assumed you were okay. For a moment I felt that old instinct, the need to comfort, to smooth things over. But I held back. You didn't want to see it, I told her. None of you did. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I'm sorry. And I believed she meant it, at least in that moment. But forgiveness? That was something else. I hope you figure things out, Sophie, I said quietly. But I can't fix this for you. Not anymore. She looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she just nodded. It was the first honest conversation we'd had in years, and even though it hurt, it also felt clean, like a wound finally being aired out. Later that week, I met up with my grandfather, Robert. We sat on his porch watching the sun set, sipping coffee in comfortable silence. Finally he spoke. You did the right thing, you know. I let out a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It doesn't feel good. He smiled slightly. Doing the right thing rarely does, but it's still right. We talked for a while, and not about money, not about trust, but about life, about what I wanted to do now that I wasn't chained to the endless demands of my family. It was the first time someone in my family asked me that. What I wanted, not what I could give, not what I could fix, but what I wanted for myself. And for the first time in years, I let myself imagine a life that wasn't built around holding everyone else up. In the weeks that followed, the calls and messages slowly faded. At first, every buzz of my phone sent a jolt through my chest, a mix of dread and guilt. But over time, the silence became something else. It became peace. I'd spent so many years waiting for the next crisis, the next demand, the next emotional ambush, that I didn't know what to do with the quiet. At first, I filled the space with small things. I cleaned my apartment. I cooked meals just for myself. I went on long walks without checking my phone every 5 minutes. It sounds simple, but for someone who's lived under constant pressure, those moments felt like tiny acts of rebellion, like I was reclaiming pieces of my life one small step at a time. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights when the guilt crept in, whispering that maybe I'd been too harsh, maybe I should reach out. Maybe family really does deserve endless chances. But then I'd remember the years I spent sacrificing myself, the years of being the backup plan, the fixer, the invisible one. And I'd remind myself, boundaries aren't cruelty, boundaries are love for myself. One afternoon, I sat on my balcony, looking out over the city, and realized something. That hit me hard. I was free. Not just free from their financial grip, but free from the need to prove my worth to people who only saw me as useful when they needed something. For the first time, my life was mine. My time, my money, my future. All open, all unwritten. And it didn't feel selfish. It felt necessary. I don't know exactly what comes next. Maybe I'll travel. Maybe I'll invest in my own dreams, something I've put off for years. What I do know is this. I'm done living under the weight of guilt and obligation. I'm done giving all of myself away for the sake of people who didn't value me. From here on out, I'm building a life that belongs to me. And that's more than enough. So here's to freedom, to healing, and to finally learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away.